Time to stumble, wander, and fall into plot. I won't use a number, and today, we're looking at Gravity Rush. This is an action-adventure game where you play as a girl who falls from the sky and then has amnesia. Because she travels around with a glowing black cat that she calls Dusty, someone dubs her Cat. Alright, fine. That's with a K, if you're curious. Dusty gives Cat the ability to control gravity, primarily her own, but other people's to an extent. Alright, now you've got me interested. In this world, that means she is known as a shifter. Early on, Cat meets the obvious rival character and fellow shifter Raven, who, yes, has a glowing black raven that presumably gives her powers. But she doesn't have amnesia, and why she goes by that name is actually related to the plot, which is interesting overall, so yay. After this encounter, Cat starts exploring this world, and it is an absolute, wait for it, rush to explore. This might sound kind of weird, but simply moving around is my favorite aspect of this game. See, with a simple push of a button, you start to float in place, and a reticule appears. Aim it in a direction, hit the same button, and you shift your personal gravity in that direction and start to fall. You can also hold a button to increase the speed of that fall. I just love the idea that your primary mode of transportation in this game is picking a direction to fall in. No fall damage, by the way. And it feels really good. Takes a little while to get used to, and it can be a bit disorienting, but once it clicks, you can quickly change direction and speed. I can't think of another game that does this smoothly, and no pun intended this time, it's a rush. And it changes the way you think about any movement situation. No climbing or looking for faster speed options like in other open world games. This is an open world game, by the way. Your best form of transportation is at your disposal from the very beginning, and it only becomes more satisfying to use as you upgrade it. Given what that ability is, the designers went and put quite a bit of verticality to each of the areas you can explore, and it means you can stand on any angle of any building, even completely upside down. You're given a constant visual reminder of which direction down actually is through Cat's hair and scarf. Your other speedy movement option is also satisfying. You can tilt your personal gravity slightly to slide speedily along whatever surface you're currently on. Whenever you're using gravity-based abilities, that blue gauge in the top left of the screen starts to tick down. If it runs out, you'll start to fall with actual gravity, so maybe be careful about where you are when you do that. It does start to regenerate as soon as it runs out though, so once you get enough upgrades, you should be fine. Though I should absolutely mention, by default, motion controls are enabled. If you're like me and hate that shit almost all of the time, you can go into the options and turn the motion sensitivity slider all the way down. This turns the motion controls off entirely, so you don't even have to worry about it. They should have just made it a toggle option instead of this needlessly confusing bullshit that I had to look up, but whatever. The other primary aspect of the gameplay is combat, which I'm not quite as in love with. It's serviceable at best. On the ground, you have kicks and a dodge. That's it. You can keep kicking, forever, and I guess that makes it a combo. But you're just hitting the same button over and over and over and over. When you're choosing where to fall with your gravity powers, you can instead perform a gravity kick, which homes in on your target and is pretty fucking satisfying, but that satisfaction will probably fade by the time the game has run its course, because you will be doing a fuck ton of these. You also have the ability to pick up objects telekinesis style and throw them at enemies. Unfortunately, I avoided using it whenever possible. If you get hit, you drop what you're carrying. And when you push the button to pick stuff around you up, you start to levitate, which makes it easier for you to be hit. You probably see the problem here. It was also never clear which of the objects I was holding would fire first, and because of that, shit would oftentimes hit something in the environment instead of my intended target. It got to the point where I just never used this option. And finally, throughout the game, you can acquire 3 special attacks that are all really cool in their own respect and can only be used periodically when you have a red dot in the center of the gravity gauge. Look, this is a laughable number of combat options. If the character in your action game has less at their disposal than your typical Dynasty Warriors character, you're doing something wrong. And for fuck's sake, the enemies all have glowing video game weak points, which is fine in most games, and sometimes can even be cleverly implemented. But the enemies in this game, with the exception of a few bosses, all have boring visual designs. They're called Nevi, which is a solid enemy name, but like they all have 2 to 3 colors. There's glowing black stuff that makes up their bodies, there's glowing red video game weak points, and some of them have grayish whitish armor protecting some of their weak points. I get that the designers were going for a sort of uniform aesthetic, and that their look has lore implications, but just, they are among the most generic video game enemies I have ever seen, which does not help with the monotony of combat. They come in a variety of shapes and sizes and do different things, which does help a bit, but just fucking hell. Honestly, the only time I was really enjoying the combat was when fights somehow integrated the need to move around a lot, and I don't attribute that to the combat mechanics, but the movement mechanics just being that damn good. Thankfully, the game isn't that hard, so the combat being kind of doesn't drag the rest of the experience down entirely. I enjoyed the story overall. It's told through a mixture of visual novel-esque conversations and motion comic sections. There's a bit of voice acting, but it's not a language that actually exists. If I'm being honest, I thought it was French before I looked it up, so French-sounding gibberish. I have no idea if the performances are any good, but hey, it works, I guess. Initially, the game world seems rather tiny. There's just a single town, and a rather small one at that is surrounded by gravity storms that consume anything they touch and is under the constant threat of attack by those generis-ass looking creatures known as Nevi, that just so happened to appear right around the time that Shifters did. It is a rather dire situation, but oddly enough, the story doesn't always reflect that, especially early on. Cat sort of wanders from place to place, presumably trying to figure out what to do with herself, and just sort of helps people that she comes across. I'm not really a fan of the protagonist wandering into the plot, but if that plot winds up being good, I can deal with it. This wandering ultimately leads to her getting caught up in the problems plaguing this town, and meeting a man who claims to be the creator of this world, who helps her restore missing parts of the town by allowing her to travel to places called Rift Plains. The Rift Plains are easily the most fun parts of the main story. They're sort of more linear, special snowflake levels that usually involve moving around while you're fighting. Restoring parts of the town gives you more areas to explore, but there's still the implication that this is the only town that exists, like, anywhere. Some people think that there are towns further up or down that mysterious gigantic pillar looming in the distance of the open world, but nobody really knows. As you advance further in the plot, you learn more and more about how this world works and what the deal with Cat's amnesia is, both rather engaging topics for me. The setting strikes me as incredibly unique, and every time I learned any more about it, I just became more interested in it. And since the plot deeply involves the world, I was interested in the plot. As for caring about Cat, if I'm being honest, it's because I really like her design. She just looks interesting. That probably makes me shallow or something, but it made me care a hell of a lot more than not at all. Honestly, all of the significant characters that aren't just supposed to look like normal-ass people look really cool. Character design is strong in this game. Good fucking job. After each story mission, conversations open up in the open world and get marked on your map, which feature NPCs, sometimes major characters, usually minor characters, commenting on the events of the story, which just adds more context to the world. If you can't guess, I liked that this was a thing. There are points in the story where your powers are restricted. These bits are kinda cool, because then levels can be constructed around your limited mobility. Unfortunately, there are also parts where your powers are straight up taken away, and those parts suck. Cat is clearly a character who is built around having those powers. When they're taken away, for one, her arsenal is incredibly limited, and what remains doesn't make for a good experience. These sections usually involve some form of platforming, and like her normal jump just kinda sucks. I could never get it to go exactly where I wanted it to. And when you have access to the gravity powers, it's fine, because you can just use those to correct whatever it was you wanted to do. But when you're forced to rely on the jump, shit's bad, man. There's even something that I thought the video game industry had collectively gotten over: a forced stealth section while your powers are gone. Blah. I'll be as clear as I can. If your game is not built from the ground up to have stealth mechanics, don't put forced stealth sections into your game. Thankfully, these problems also aren't huge in my opinion, which also comes back to the game being rather easy and, moreover in this case, incredibly generous with its checkpointing. Worst comes to worst, you can just sort of brute force your way through these sections. Now, if you were to just blaze your way through the story, it probably wouldn't take too long, but there are other things you can do if you want to spend more time with this game. There are various challenges scattered throughout the map, checkpoint races, things where you're supposed to take out Nevi very quickly, things like that. Nothing really too surprising. Normally, I'm not one for challenges. They just kind of bore me, but in this game I love the mobility system so much that being forced to use them incredibly efficiently was fun to me. And the challenges are the most efficient way to get the currency used to upgrade Cat's capabilities, so I didn't feel like I was wasting my time. Cheers for RPG-ish mechanics, I suppose. Unfortunately, I fell off doing the challenges because there isn't an incredibly efficient way to restart those challenges during them. You can also get the upgrade currency by picking up floating gems scattered throughout the open world. I found it to be as oddly satisfying as I did in old school 3D platformers, and it gave me another excuse to use the mobility powers, so no complaints from me on that front. That upgrade currency can also be used to unlock other challenges by repairing bits of the town's infrastructure. Man, Cat is just all kinds of hero. It's a good idea to go around and unlock, well, all of these. Each challenge unlocked, story mission completed, and side mission completed adds to Cat's reputation, and when Cat's reputation goes up, the upgrade caps on abilities also go up. Turns out being popular does make you more powerful, which means I'm weak as hell. Shit. Oh, right. You're probably wondering about those side missions I just casually mentioned. When this game initially released on the Vita, DLC packs were released for that version. In the PS4 version, they're just included as part of the game. There's 4 sets of 2 missions that each show you another aspect of this world through stuff that probably wouldn't fit too well within the main story. They're mostly enjoyable, if not a bit simple, and each of them gives you a new costume. Nice. You can also find sewer grates that unlock fast travel locations, and scattered throughout everywhere you can go in the game are conversations you can have with a man and a woman who seem to be lost in space-time. More world building. Fun. These conversations aren't marked on your map, but you will get an indication of what area they're in once you're in the post-game. Personally, I tried to find as many of these conversations as I could while I just naturally played the game, then used a guide in the post-game to find the rest. If you don't want to go through the trouble, I'm sure that you can find all of these conversations on YouTube somewhere. The music in the game ranges from okay to quite enjoyable. The Entertainment District theme is great, but no other individual track really stood out to me. I'm also going to mention that I like hardcore ship Cat and Raven. It doesn't really go anywhere, and I doubt it will in the sequel, but I can dream, damn it. While a version did exist on the Vita, I played the PS4 remastered version, and on PS4, it runs like a dream, 60 FPS the whole time. Though it is sometimes clear that the models were created for a weaker system, especially in cutscenes. And for whatever reason, the PS4 version still has a feature from the Vita version where the menus and motion comic cutscenes tilt around when you move the controller. It's just a bit weird and kind of pointless. And if I wasn't literally staring at the sequel right now, I would complain that this game ends with quite a few plot points unresolved and questions unanswered. If when you're watching this, I don't have a Gravity Rush 2 video up, it's probably safe to assume that I'm either playing it or working on that video. Overall, Gravity Rush has quite a few issues, but I still enjoyed my time with the game. Despite the lackluster and repetitive combat, I was sucked into the world and had a blast every time I was falling towards the sky or sliding across the side of a building. It's probably not a game for everyone, but you might enjoy it. That said, this has been I Won't Use a Number. If you like this video, you can subscribe and maybe share it with your friends. Keep loving what you love, and I'll see you next time with something else.